Fire Emblem is a long-running series of tactical RPGs that have bounced back and forth between having social sim mechanics and being more focused on strategy. Three Houses leans a little bit more towards the social sim side, but I have a good variety for you here. So let's start with one that probably doesn't get enough love. The first game that I'd recommend for fans of Fire Emblem Three Houses is Stella Glow. Stella Glow has a system that will feel similar for people that played Three Houses, breaking up the gameplay between tactical battles and free time sections. You can use your free time to build up relationships with your companions, do various jobs, or explore, and depending on how you build those relationships, you'll get different versions of the ending. Stella Glow has some really unique mechanics, like the tuning system that's a bit like diving into weapons in Disgaea, where you fight against physical manifestations of characters' inner demons, or the song magic that each witch can use, where your character conducts them and they have a variety of different effects that can change an entire battle. This is the last game by Image Epoch, who had a good run of strategy RPGs with the Luminous Arc series and some more niche JRPGs like Seventh Dragon and Arc Rise Fantasia. Stella Glow is a solid game, so give it a shot. You can play Stella Glow on Nintendo 3DS. The next game that I'd like to recommend really comes in the form of two different games in the same series. Lost Eidolons is the first game, and the structure is much more similar to Fire Emblem Three Houses. You have your main hub where different things happen, the story plays out, and you can interact with various characters. A lot of the mechanics in Lost Eidolons very similar to those in Three Houses. It's like the AA budget version, so expect a bit of roughness around the edges. They tighten things up with their next game, Lost Eidolons Veil of the Witch, but the newer game also adds roguelike mechanics, so it has a very different structure that might not appeal to Fire Emblem fans, though the battles themselves definitely will have appeal. Veil of the Witch also had a much more positive reception, so they clearly fixed some of their earlier issues, even if I personally wish they had done that without going into a different genre like the roguelike genre. Some people might enjoy that even more though, so either way, you can play both games right now on Steam. And speaking of multiple games within the same series, this next one is an epic that stretches across 3 different games, each scenario affecting the others in interesting ways. Shining Force 3 is a game that I highly recommend to fans of Fire Emblem Three Houses and fans of tactical RPGs in general. In my opinion, it's a bit criminal that we don't have some sort of remaster of the full thing in English, but unfortunately Nintendo's been putting Camelot to work on sports games. Shining Force 3 breaks things up in a similar way to Three Houses, but adds more to it. Instead of having 1 or 2 main hubs, you move to all sorts of different locations, allowing you to explore, find hidden secrets, including not just items, but also recruitable characters. And on top of that, it's famous for a really cool crossover mechanic. The game is chopped into 3 separate scenarios that are technically each their own game, and those all synchronize to each other. So depending on choices that you make, characters might become available in other scenarios, or they might be dead. You share some resources as well between scenarios, letting you keep rare items and use them if you found them earlier. And there are even maps that will be altered depending on how you tackle them in other chapters. Then, in the final scenario, it all comes together, which is frankly pretty crazy for games from 1997 and 1998 that released for the Sega Saturn. Fire Emblem even borrows a lot of ideas from Shining Force 3, though it isn't clear whether they took them from there. They might have just ended up in the same spot. It iterated on the friendship support system to make it more interesting, so attacking next to other characters builds up points and gives them boosts, which didn't become a thing in the same way until the GBA Fire Emblems, which was something like 3 or 4 years after Shining Force 3. Fire Emblem also shares some of the ideas in the narrative structure, how it's all broken apart and shown in different perspectives. If there's one game you take away from this, I'd make it this one. Just keep in mind it's from the early era of 3D graphics, so it won't always look pretty, though it looks much better on a CRT or with a CRT filter, and it improves from Scenario 1 to 3. You can play all 3 Shining Force 3 scenarios on Sega Saturn. Now, we're going to take a bit of a sidetrack here with something off the beaten path. Marvel's Midnight Suns is actually very similar to Fire Emblem Three Houses. The main thing that makes it so similar is the structure. The game is broken into different parts. So part of the day you'll be taking part in tactical battles, but the rest is taken up by socializing with various heroes, getting involved directly into their lives, their insecurities, and really digging into them personally. It even has its own hub called the Abbey, where there are various clubs that you can get into to play mini games, and where you can also give the various heroes gifts to boost their friendship. It dives very deep into the social sim aspect. It's basically half the game. The other half is the combat, which is a tactical gridless style with deck building, basically combining the tactical genre with cards. It's surprisingly deep, and it has a fun system that has a lot of differences from Fire Emblem, but I think will appeal to a lot of people who enjoy tactical combat. You can play Marvel's Midnight Suns on PS5, Xbox, and PC. And the next game I'd really like to recommend is Triangle Strategy. Triangle Strategy is sort of like the child of Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre. It has a lot of systems that should appeal to people that like Fire Emblem, and even has systems where, depending on your choices, you'll end up in different factions. The story branches out in a very similar way, and it treats characters more like characters instead of just classes, with each character having their own personality and goals. Triangle Strategy doesn't have quite the same level of social simulation, but it is high on the list in a lot of areas in terms of mechanics that both games share, so it might even appeal more to fans of older Fire Emblem games. You can play Triangle Strategy on all modern consoles and PC. And the other more modern game I'd like to highlight takes a bit of a departure, but I'd still recommend Unicorn Overlord. Unicorn Overlord has many differences to Fire Emblem Three Houses, but I still think it'll appeal to fans of it for a few reasons. It definitely has the social sim parts of Fire Emblem Three Houses, including allowing you to pick a romantic partner, while the strategy is different, having you fight with multiple different squads, more like an old school Ogre battle style game. They're still both strategy games at their core, and it's fun to try a different style that's still in the same area. It also shares the same sort of rock, paper, scissors style battles where you have to think about how each archetype and class you use will fight against your enemy. And at the peak of the reasons to try it is that Unicorn Overlord is just a really fun game. It has this beautiful art style coming from the genius artists over at Vanillaware, even if it does have a little bit of a silly name, so give it a shot. You can play it on all modern consoles, though it's not on PC yet. Hopefully it will be someday. And for the bonus games, I thought I'd start with something a bit out there. Look into Growlancer 4. It's quite a bit different, but has enough similar concepts that you should give it a shot. It's a lot of fun and pretty heavily underrated. Obviously, if you somehow haven't, look at Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre. They're top class in the genre. There's a reason I didn't put them in the main list, and that's because you don't need to hear me recommend them. You probably already know about them. That being said, I do have another video about games like Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre, so if you want some more recommendations, maybe take a look at that. I'll link it in the description. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for more like this. Thanks for watching.